My name is Dean. I am 54 years old, and I was sitting at my mother's Thanksgiving table with a brown envelope in my lap. My daughter Stephanie had just called me pathetic in front of the entire family. She said I abandoned her mother over a 20-year-old fling. She said I was selfish. Everyone was staring at me, waiting for my reaction. But I just smiled, because what Stephanie did not know was that I had been waiting for this exact moment for 6 months. Have you ever discovered a truth that changed everything you thought you knew about your family? Before I tell you what was in that envelope, please hit the like button and subscribe. Trust me, you will want to hear how this Thanksgiving dinner ended. I met Sandra in the summer of 1993 in Denver, Colorado. I was 23 years old back then, fresh out of engineering school working as an electrician for a mid-sized construction company. Sandra was 22, a nurse at the local hospital. We met at a barbecue thrown by a mutual friend. I remember the moment I saw her. She was standing by the grill, laughing at something someone said, her brown hair catching the afternoon sunlight. Her smile was easy and warm. When she looked at me, I felt like the only person in the world. We started dating within a week. Sandra was everything I thought I wanted. She was thoughtful, kind, and she made me feel like I mattered. We would spend weekends hiking in the Rockies or just sitting on my tiny apartment balcony, talking about our dreams. She wanted a simple life, a house with a backyard, maybe a dog kid someday. I wanted the same thing. After a year of dating, I proposed to her at a small Italian restaurant. She said yes before I even finished asking. We got married in the spring of 1994. It was a small wedding, maybe 60 people held at a community hall. Nothing fancy. Just us, our families, and a future we believed would be bright. We rented a small 2-bedroom apartment in the suburbs of Denver. I worked long hours on construction sites, climbing up scaffolding, running electrical wiring through unfinished buildings. Sandra worked the day shift at the hospital, taking care of patients with a gentleness I admired. We were not rich, but we were happy. At least I thought we were. In 1996, Sandra told me she was pregnant. I remember the night she told me. She was standing in our tiny kitchen holding the pregnancy test in her hand, tears streaming down her face. I thought she was scared, so I held her and told her everything would be okay. We were going to be parents. I was going to be a father. The idea filled me with a kind of joy I had never felt before. Stephanie was born in October of that year. She weighed 7 pounds and 3 ounces. She had a full head of blonde hair and bright blue eyes. I held her in my arms at the hospital and felt my entire world shift. This tiny human was mine to protect, to love, to guide. I promised myself I would be the best father I could be. But even in those early days, there was something that nagged at me. Stephanie looked nothing like me. I have brown hair and brown eyes. Sandra has brown hair and brown eyes too. Yet Stephanie was blonde with blue eyes. When I mentioned it to Sandra, she laughed it off. She said her aunt on her mother's side had blonde hair. She said genetics could skip generations. I believed her because I loved her. I trusted her completely. The years passed. Stephanie grew into a beautiful little girl. I taught her how to ride a bike in our driveway, running beside her as she wobbled on 2 wheels for the first time. I took her to the movies every Saturday, where we would share a large popcorn, and she would fall asleep on my shoulder during the second half. I helped her with her homework at the kitchen table, patiently explaining long division and fractions. I was there for every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every milestone. She called me Daddy, and I melted every time she said it. Sandra and I settled into a rhythm. We bought a small house in the year 2000 in a quiet neighborhood. It had 3 bedrooms, a backyard with a swing set, and a garage where I kept my tools. Life was not perfect, but it was good. Or so I thought. Around 2003 or 2004, I started noticing changes in Sandra. She became distant. She started picking up extra shifts at the hospital, working late into the night. She said they were short-staffed, that she needed the overtime pay. I believed her. I was working long hours, too, trying to move up in the company. We were like 2 ships passing in the night. We talked less. We laughed less. Our intimacy faded. I chalked it up to the stress of raising a child and managing careers. I thought things would get better eventually, but they did not. Sandra grew colder. She stopped asking about my day. She stopped touching me the way she used to. When I tried to bring it up, she would deflect, saying she was tired or that I was being dramatic. So I stopped trying. I focused on Stephanie instead. I poured all my love and energy into being the best father I could be. I told myself that as long as Stephanie was happy, I could endure the loneliness. Stephanie grew up. She graduated from high school in 2014, went off to college, and earned a degree in marketing. By 2018, she had a good job at a local firm. She moved into her own apartment. Sandra and I were empty nesters, but instead of bringing us closer, it only highlighted how far apart we had drifted. We were roommates, not partners. We shared a house, but not a life. I kept hoping things would change. I kept hoping Sandra would wake up one day and want to fix what we had broken. But she never did, and I was too afraid to push. I was afraid of what I might find if I asked the hard questions. So I stayed quiet. I stayed in a marriage that felt like a prison. And I told myself it was enough. Everything changed in January of 2024. It was a Sunday morning, cold and quiet. Sandra had gone out early to run errands. She said she was going to the grocery store. I was sitting in the kitchen drinking coffee and reading the news on my tablet. Her phone was on the counter. She had left it behind, which was unusual because Sandra never went anywhere without her phone. The phone buzzed. A text message appeared on the screen. I glanced at it without thinking. It said, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Love you, babe." It was from a contact saved as J. My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Who was J? Why were they texting my wife like this? I knew I should not have, but I picked up her phone. I knew her passcode. She had told it to me years ago, for some reason I could not remember. I unlocked the phone and opened the messages. What I found shattered me. There were dozens of messages between Sandra and Jay. They were intimate, affectionate, sexual. They talked about meeting up at hotels. They reminisced about their time together. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Jay had written 20 years and I still can't get enough of you. 20 years. That meant this had been going on since 2004. Maybe earlier. I scrolled further back, my hands shaking. Sandra had written, "Best decision I ever made was choosing you." Choosing him. Not me. Him. I felt sick. I put the phone down and stared at the wall. My mind was spinning. 20 years. She had been cheating on me for 20 years. How had I not known? How had I been so blind? And then another thought hit me, one that made my chest tighten with panic. If Sandra had been unfaithful for 20 years, what about Stephanie? Stephanie was born in 1996. Sandra and I got married in 1994. We started trying for a baby in 1995. But what if Sandra had been with someone else during that time? I thought about Stephanie's blonde hair and blue eyes. I thought about how she looked nothing like me. Sandra had always explained it away with genetics. But what if that was a lie? What if Stephanie was not my daughter? The thought was unbearable. But I could not ignore it. I had to know the truth. I spent the rest of that day in a fog. When Sandra came home, I acted normal. I did not confront her. I needed time to think. I needed proof. Over the next few days, I went back to Sandra's phone whenever I got the chance. I learned more about Jay. His full name was Justin Palmer. There were photos of him in a hidden folder on her phone. He was tall blonde with blue eyes. He looked exactly like Stephanie. I found older messages too. Messages that went back years. In one conversation from 2015, Justin had written, "I wish I could tell her the truth." Sandra had replied, "Not yet, maybe when she's older." Tell who the truth? Stephanie. What truth? I pieced it together slowly. Justin and Sandra had known each other before we got married. They had been together. And somehow they had reconnected. Or maybe they had never really been apart. I could not take it anymore. I had to know if Stephanie was my daughter. In early February, I went to a pharmacy and bought a DNA testing kit. I waited until Sandra and Stephanie were both out of the house, then I collected a sample from Stephanie's toothbrush. I sent it off to the lab along with my own sample. Then I waited. Those 3 weeks were the longest of my life. I could barely sleep. I kept replaying my life in my head, searching for clues I had missed. Every memory felt tainted now. Every moment of joy I had shared with Stephanie was now clouded with doubt. The results came back in early March. I was sitting in my car outside my office when I opened the email. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I read the report once, then twice, then a third time, hoping I had misread it, but there was no mistake. The test confirmed that I was not Stephanie's biological father. The probability of paternity was 0%. I sat there in my car and cried. 28 years. I had spent 28 years raising a child who was not mine. I had poured my heart and soul into being a father. I had sacrificed, worked, loved with everything I had. And it had all been based on a lie. I did not confront Sandra right away. I needed time to process. I needed to understand the full scope of what she had done. I hired a private investigator. I gave him Justin Palmer's name and asked him to find out everything he could. Over the next few weeks, I learned the truth. Justin Palmer was 53 years old, a year younger than me. He lived in Boulder, Colorado, about 30 miles from Denver. He was the CFO of a tech company making around $180,000 a year. He had never been married. He had no legal children, but he had been in a relationship with Sandra since at least 2004, maybe earlier. The investigator found photos of them together at restaurants, hotels, even a vacation they had taken to Mexico. Sandra had lied to me about every late shift, every work trip, every excuse she had made over the years. She had been with Justin, and then I found something even worse. Justin knew about Stephanie. He had always known. The investigator found old emails between Sandra and Justin from 1995, just before Sandra and I got married. Sandra had told Justin she was pregnant. Justin had said he was not ready to be a father. Sandra had panicked. She had turned to me. I was the safe choice, the reliable choice, the man who would never question her. I felt like a fool. I had been used, manipulated. Sandra had built her entire life on a lie, and I had been her unwitting accomplice. In late March, I decided it was time to confront her. I waited until Stephanie was out for the evening. Sandra was in the living room watching television. I walked in, sat down across from her, and placed the DNA test results on the coffee table. She looked at the paper, then at me. Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I said, "Do you want to explain this?" For a long moment, she just stared at the paper. Then she started to cry. She told me everything. She said she had been in love with Justin since high school. They had dated for years, but in 1993, Justin had gone to Europe to study abroad. They had broken up. Sandra had been heartbroken. That is when she met me. She said she had genuinely cared for me, at first. But in 1995, Justin came back. They reconnected. They slept together. Sandra got pregnant. She told Justin, but he said he was not ready for a family. He was focused on his career. Sandra panicked. She did not know what to do. So she married me. She let me believe Stephanie was mine. Justin reached out to her again in 2004. He said he had made a mistake. He said he wanted her back. And Sandra, who had never really stopped loving him, said yes. They had been together ever since. I asked her if Stephanie knew. Sandra shook her head. She said she had never told Stephanie the truth. She said she was too afraid. I asked her if Justin knew Stephanie was his daughter. Sandra nodded. She said Justin had always known. He had even given Sandra money over the years to help raise Stephanie, though I had never known about it. I felt a rage so deep I could barely breathe. I stood up and told Sandra I was filing for divorce. She begged me not to. She said she was sorry. She said she had made mistakes. But I was done listening. The next day I called a lawyer. His name was Mr. Harrison. He was 48 years old, experienced in family law. I told him everything. I showed him the DNA test, the text messages, the investigator's report. Mr. Harrison said I had a strong case. He said we could file for divorce on the grounds of fraud and adultery. He said I would not have to pay child support for Stephanie because she was not my biological daughter. He said we could split the assets fairly under Colorado law. I told him to proceed. I filed for divorce in early April. Sandra hired her own lawyer and tried to fight it. But the evidence was overwhelming. She could not deny what she had done. The hardest part was Stephanie. When I moved out of the house in mid-April, Stephanie called me. She was furious. Sandra had told her that I was leaving because of an old affair. Sandra had twisted the truth, made it sound like I was abandoning the family over something trivial. Stephanie yelled at me over the phone. She said, "How could you leave Mom over something that happened so long ago? You are being selfish and pathetic. Mom made one mistake, and you can't forgive her." I tried to explain, but Stephanie would not listen. She hung up on me. She stopped answering my calls. She blocked me on social media. She turned her back on me completely. It broke my heart, but I understood. Sandra had lied to her too. Stephanie did not know the full truth, and I was not ready to tell her yet. I wanted her to be older, more mature, before I shattered her world the way mine had been shattered. The divorce dragged on for months. Stephanie testified in court on Sandra's behalf. She said I was a terrible husband, a terrible father. She said I had abandoned them. I sat there and listened, saying nothing. My lawyer asked me multiple times if I wanted to present the DNA evidence in court to prove that Stephanie was not my daughter. But I said no. I wanted Stephanie to learn the truth on her own terms, not in a courtroom. In October of 2024, the divorce was finalized. The judge ruled in my favor. I kept 60% of our assets. Sandra got 40%. I was not required to pay alimony or child support. Sandra was furious, but there was nothing she could do. The law was clear. I was free. But I felt anything but free. I had lost my wife. I had lost my daughter. I had lost 28 years of my life. After the divorce, I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Denver. It was not much, but it was mine. I threw myself into my work. My company promoted me to project manager. I started making more money. I reconnected with old friends. There was Gary, who was 56 years old and had been an electrician with me back in the 90s. There was Linda, who was 52 and worked in accounting. She had gone through a divorce 3 years earlier and understood what I was going through. Gary and Linda became my support system. They listened when I needed to talk. They gave me space when I needed to be alone. Slowly, I started to rebuild my life, but I could not stop thinking about Stephanie. She was still angry with me. She had posted things on social media, vague posts about how some people could not forgive and move on. She organized a birthday party for Sandra in September and did not invite me. Every post, every update was a reminder that I had lost her. In early November, my mother called me. Her name is Dorothy. She is 76 years old and lives in Fort Collins, about 65 miles north of Denver. She told me she was planning a Thanksgiving dinner and wanted me to come. I hesitated. I had not celebrated Thanksgiving with the family since the divorce, but my mother insisted. She said family was important, especially during the holidays. Then she said something that made me pause. She said she had also invited Sandra and Stephanie. She said it was tradition to have the whole family together, and she hoped we could put aside our differences for one day. I asked her if Sandra and Stephanie had agreed to come. My mother said yes. Sandra had already confirmed. Stephanie had too. I thought about it for a long time. Part of me did not want to go. I did not want to sit at the same table as Sandra. I did not want to face Stephanie's anger. But another part of me saw an opportunity. This could be my chance to finally tell Stephanie the truth, not in a courtroom, not over the phone, but face-to-face in front of the family, so there could be no more lies. I told my mother I would be there. In the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, I prepared. I had already gathered all the evidence I needed months ago. I had the DNA test results. I had Justin Palmer's address, his photo, his phone number. I had a letter I had written to Stephanie explaining everything. I put it all in 3 separate envelopes. The first envelope contained the DNA test results, notarized and official. The second envelope contained information about Justin Palmer, including his photo and address. The third envelope contained my letter. In the letter I wrote about how much I had loved Stephanie. I wrote about every memory we had shared, every moment of joy, every sacrifice I had made. I told her that my love for her had been real, even if our biological connection was not. I told her that Sandra had lied to both of us. I told her that Justin Palmer was her real father, and that he had known about her all along. I told her that she deserved to know the truth, no matter how painful it was. I read that letter dozens of times. I revised it. I rewrote it. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted Stephanie to understand that I was not doing this to hurt her. I was doing this because she deserved the truth. The night before Thanksgiving, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about the past 28 years. I thought about teaching Stephanie how to ride a bike. I thought about taking her to her first day of school. I thought about helping her move into her college dorm. Every memory was precious to me. But every memory was also tainted by the knowledge that it had all been built on a lie. I got up early on Thanksgiving morning. I put on a clean shirt and jeans. I placed the 3 envelopes in the inside pocket of my jacket. Then I drove to Fort Collins. When I arrived at my mother's house, I saw Sandra's car, already parked in the driveway. My heart sank. I took a deep breath and walked inside. The house smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon. My mother greeted me at the door with a warm hug. She looked older than I remembered her hair, more grey, her face more lined. But her smile was the same. Inside, Sandra and Stephanie were sitting in the living room. Sandra looked up when I walked in, then quickly looked away. Stephanie glared at me. Her blue eyes, so much like Justin Palmer's, were filled with contempt. Also there were my Aunt Margaret, who was 68, and her husband Frank, who was 70. They greeted me politely, though I could feel the tension in the room. We all moved to the dining room. My mother had set the table beautifully. There was a roasted turkey in the center, surrounded by mashed potatoes, green beans, cranberry sauce, stuffing, and pumpkin pie. It looked like a scene from a holiday movie, but the atmosphere was anything but festive. We sat down. I ended up sitting across from Stephanie. Sandra was at the far end of the table next to my mother. Margaret and Frank sat on the other side. Everyone filled their plates in silence. The only sounds were the clinking of silverware and the occasional request to pass the salt or the gravy. We ate for a few minutes. Then Stephanie broke the silence. She said, "Grandmother, I still don't understand why you invited Dad here." My mother looked up surprised. She said, "Sweetheart, this is Thanksgiving. Family should be together." Stephanie shook her head. She said, "But he left us. He abandoned Mom over a 20-year-old fling. That is pathetic." The table went silent. Everyone stopped eating. Sandra said quietly, "Stephanie, don't." But Stephanie was not done. She looked directly at me and said, "No, Mum. Someone needs to say it. Dad is selfish. He threw away 28 years of marriage because he can't forgive one mistake. You know what, Dad? You are pathetic for leaving Mom over something so small." Margaret and Frank looked uncomfortable. My mother looked at me with worry in her eyes. Sandra was staring at her plate, her face pale. I put down my fork. I looked at Stephanie. I felt calm. I had been preparing for this moment for months. I said, "Stephanie, are you sure you want to have this conversation?" She said, "Yes, I want everyone here to know what kind of man you are." I nodded. I said, "All right. But before we continue, you need to see something." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the first envelope. I slid it across the table to Stephanie. She looked at it, confused. She said, "What is this?" I said, "Open it." She picked up the envelope and opened it. She pulled out the paper inside. Her eyes scanned the document. I watched as her face changed. The anger drained away, replaced by confusion, then shock. She looked up at me. Her voice was shaking. She said, This has to be a mistake." I shook my head. I said, "It is not a mistake. I had the test done 3 times at 3 different labs. The results were the same every time." Stephanie looked at the paper again. It was a DNA test result. It clearly stated that there was a 0% probability that I was her biological father. She turned to Sandra. Her voice was barely a whisper. She said, "Mum, what is he talking about?" Sandra had her face in her hands. She was crying. She did not answer. I continued. I said, "Sandra, tell her, or I will." Sandra remained silent. So I spoke. I looked at Stephanie and said, "Your mother had an affair, for 20 years, with a man named Justin Palmer. But that is not the worst part. Justin Palmer is your biological father." Stephanie stared at me. She said, "That is a lie." I pulled out the second envelope. I slid it across the table to her. I said, "This is Justin Palmer, his address, his phone number, and his photo." Stephanie opened the envelope. Inside was a printed photo of Justin Palmer, along with his contact information. She looked at the photo. Her hands started to shake. Justin Palmer, had blonde hair and blue eyes just like her. The resemblance was undeniable. I said, "Your mother was pregnant with you before she married me. Justin did not want to be a father back then. So Sandra married me instead. She let me believe you were mine. But you are not. You never were." Stephanie looked at Sandra. Her voice cracked. She said, "Mum, is this true?" Sandra was sobbing now. She nodded. She said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Stephanie stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She said, "You lied to me my entire life." Sandra said, "I did it to protect you." Stephanie shouted, "Protect me! You let me grow up thinking Dean was my father when he wasn't." She turned to me. She said, "And you? You knew this and didn't tell me." I said, "I wanted you to know at the right time. But you chose to side with your mother. You chose to attack me in front of the family. So now you know the truth." I pulled out the third envelope. I placed it on the table in front of her. I said, "This is a letter I wrote for you. Read it when you are ready." Stephanie picked up the envelope. She was shaking. Tears were streaming down her face. She looked at me, then at Sandra, then at the DNA test results in her hand. My mother was crying. Margaret and Frank sat frozen, unable to speak. Sandra stood up. She tried to walk toward Stephanie. She said, "Please, sweetheart, let me explain." But Stephanie held up her hand. She said, "Don't touch me." She grabbed her purse and the envelopes. She ran out of the house. A moment later, we heard her car start. She drove away. The dining room was silent. Sandra collapsed back into her chair, sobbing. My mother came over and put her hand on my shoulder. She said, "Oh, Dean, I am so sorry." I stood up. I said, "I'm sorry for ruining Thanksgiving." But she needed to know. I walked out of the house. I got into my car and drove back to Denver. Behind me, I left the wreckage of a family that had been built on lies. The days after Thanksgiving were strange. I went to work as usual. I talked to Gary and Linda. I went to the gym. I tried to go about my life. But I could not stop thinking about Stephanie. I wondered if she had read my letter. I wondered if she hated me now more than ever. A week after Thanksgiving, my phone rang. It was Stephanie. My heart pounded as I answered. Her voice was hoarse. She said, "I read your letter." I said, "And how do you feel?" She said, "I feel like my entire life was a lie. I don't know who I am anymore." I said, "I understand. I felt the same way for the past 9 months." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I said, "Because I wanted you to be ready. I wanted you to see for yourself what your mother had done. But you kept defending her. You kept attacking me. So I decided it was time you knew the truth." She said, "Did you ever really love me?" I felt a lump in my throat. I said, "I loved you every single day for 28 years. You may not be my biological daughter, but my love for you was never fake. It was real. Every moment of it." Stephanie started to cry. She said, "I don't know what to do." I said, "You do what you need to do. You take your time. You figure out who you are. And when you are ready, I will be here." She hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, hoping I had said the right thing. In December, Stephanie made a decision. She called me and told me she was going to meet Justin Palmer. She asked me if I thought it was a good idea. I told her yes. I told her that Justin was her biological father and that he deserved to know her, and she deserved to know him. A few days later, Stephanie drove to Boulder and met Justin at a coffee shop. She told me about it afterward. She said Justin was shocked when she walked up to him. She showed him the DNA test. She told him she knew the truth. Justin had broken down in tears. He said he had always known about her. He said Sandra had kept him away. He said he had wanted to be part of her life, but Sandra had refused. He said he had been sending money to Sandra over the years to help raise Stephanie. though I had never known about it. Justin apologized to Stephanie. He said he should have fought harder to be her father. He said he had been a coward. Stephanie said she did not know how to feel about him yet, but she agreed to stay in touch. Sandra, meanwhile, was suffering. She had lost her standing in the family. My mother refused to speak to her. My Aunt Margaret and Uncle Frank distanced themselves from her. Stephanie moved out of Sandra's house and into her own apartment. She saw Sandra occasionally, but their relationship was strained. Sandra was alone. Sandra tried to reach out to me several times. She sent me text messages, emails, even a handwritten letter. She apologized. She said she had made terrible mistakes. She begged me to forgive her. I never responded. I had nothing to say to her. She had taken 28 years of my life and built them on lies. There was no apology big enough for that. As for me, I focused on rebuilding. I threw myself into my work. I got promoted again at my job. My salary increased. I saved up and bought a small house in a quiet suburb of Denver. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine. It was a place where I could start fresh. I also started dating Linda. We had been friends for months, and one night over dinner, we realized there was something more between us. We took it slow. Neither of us was in a hurry. We both knew what it was like to be hurt. But we also knew what it was like to hope again. Linda was kind and patient. She listened when I needed to talk about Stephanie. She gave me space when I needed to be alone. She did not try to replace what I had lost. She just offered me something new, something real. In early January of 2025, Stephanie called me again. She said, "I've been seeing a therapist. We've been talking about everything that happened." I said, "That is good. I'm glad you are getting help." She said, "I want to keep calling you Dad if that is okay." I was surprised. I said, "Why?" She said, "Because you were the one who raised me. You were there for me. Justin may be my biological father, but you are my dad. You taught me how to ride a bike. You took me to the movies every Saturday. You helped me with my homework. You were there for every school play, every milestone. That counts for something." I felt tears in my eyes. I said I would be honored if you still called me Dad. She said, "But I need time to process everything. I'm still angry. I'm still hurt. I need to figure out who I am now." I said, "I understand. Take all the time you need. I will be here." She said, "Thank you, Dad." When I hung up, I sat in my new house and looked out the window at the backyard. It was winter, and the grass was brown, but I could already picture what it would look like in the spring. I could picture planting flowers, maybe putting in a small garden. I could picture Linda sitting on the porch with me, drinking coffee in the morning. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I had lost a lot. I had lost a wife who never really loved me. I had lost 28 years to a lie. But I had also gained something. I had gained my freedom. I had gained the truth. And I had gained the knowledge that I had done the right thing even when it hurt. I thought about Sandra alone in the house we used to share, living with the consequences of her choices. I thought about Justin, who was now trying to build a relationship with the daughter he had never known. I thought about Stephanie, who was navigating a new reality, trying to figure out who she was in the wake of so many lies. And I thought about myself. I was 54 years old. I had a good job, a new home, and a woman who cared about me. I had friends who supported me. I had a future that was mine to shape. The truth had destroyed a family built on lies. But maybe that was necessary. Maybe some things need to be torn down before they can be rebuilt. Looking back now, I realize that the journey from discovery to healing was not a straight line. There were days when I felt strong, and days when I felt broken. There were nights when I questioned everything. when I wondered if I had done the right thing by revealing the truth at Thanksgiving. But in the quiet moments when I sit on my porch and watch the sun set over the mountains, I know I made the right choice. Truth, no matter how painful, is always better than a comfortable lie. I think about the life I had with Sandra. 28 years of marriage. Most of it felt real at the time. The laughter, the struggles, the quiet Sunday mornings. But underneath it all was a foundation of deceit. And no matter how beautiful a house looks, if the foundation is rotten, it will eventually crumble. Stephanie is still finding her way. She sees a therapist twice a week. She has met with Justin a handful of times. They are taking it slow, trying to build something where nothing existed before. It is awkward and painful, but it is also honest. And honesty, I have learned, is worth more than comfort. Sandra reached out to me one last time in late January. She asked if we could meet for coffee. She said she wanted closure. I agreed, though I was not sure what closure meant for either of us. We met at a small cafe in downtown Denver. She looked older, tired. She ordered tea, but did not drink it. She just held the cup in her hands and stared at it. She said, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to say that I'm sorry. For all of it." I said, "Why did you do it, Sandra? Why did you lie for so long?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Because I was scared. I was scared of being alone. I was scared of what people would think. And by the time I realized how deep the lie had gone, I didn't know how to get out." I said, "You could have told me the truth at any point. You could have been honest." She nodded. She said, "I know, and I will regret that for the rest of my life." We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then I stood up. I said, "I hope you find peace, Sandra. I really do. But I can't be part of your life anymore." She nodded. She did not try to stop me. I walked out of the cafe and never looked back. As the months pass, I am learning to let go of the anger. Anger is heavy, and I have carried it long enough. I am learning to focus on what I have now rather than what I lost. I have a home. I have Linda. I have friends. And I have Stephanie, even if our relationship is different now. Stephanie and I talk on the phone every couple of weeks. She tells me about her therapy sessions, her job, her life. She does not call me as often as she used to. But when she does, I can hear something in her voice that was not there before. It is honesty. It is vulnerability. It is the sound of someone who is no longer living in the shadow of a lie. I don't know if Stephanie will ever fully forgive Sandra. I don't know if she will ever have a real relationship with Justin. I don't know if she will ever call me Dad again without feeling a pang of confusion. But I do know this. Truth, no matter how painful, is always better than a comfortable lie. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is not protecting them from the truth, but trusting them to handle it. That Thanksgiving dinner destroyed a family built on lies. But maybe, just maybe, it gave us all a chance to build something real. I don't know if Helen planned all of this, or if life just unfolded the way it needed to. But I do know one thing. Sometimes the greatest inheritance is not money, but the wisdom to use it right. And maybe, just maybe, that is what she wanted me to learn all along. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to tell the truth, even when it hurt the people you loved? Have you ever discovered something that changed everything you thought you knew about your family? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you in some way. May you always have the courage to face the truth, no matter how difficult it may be. Take care, and I will see you in the next one.